All right. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is, welcome to another installment of Landlord, Tenant University. My name is Sean Kirkwood.
I am Miranda Brewer.
And we are excited to have you with us again for another installment of what is an ongoing empowerment series called Landlord, Tenant University. On today's presentation, we have a goodie. We have two folks in the community who definitely help a lot of our Kansas Cityans in different capacities. First, today we'll have the Honorable Judge Todd Wilshere, who will be coming to us today to kind of educate everybody about what goes on in his courtroom and kind of to demystify the court process. Nobody likes going to court. I'm a living witness to that. But once you get in the court, it can be the beginning of a process that will, bring your house into compliance and will get you some necessary help that the city has to offer. And on the second half of the show, we'll have Section Manager Roger Stewart. And Roger Stewart, he'll talk to you about some programs that can help via the Municipal Court Fund. He'll also talk about home and repair programs that the city has to offer. So this will be a goodie for you to share, for you to take back to your community. And hopefully, this will help also with transparency in government. We want to demystify who we are. We want to let you know that we're taxpayers. We live in the city, and we want to see this city, in all its fine glory. So this will be a great episode. So without further ado, we have the Honorable Judge Todd Wilshere. We know his time is important, so we want to give him the platform to educate us on the court process. So Judge Wilshere, you have it.
I will have at it. Thank you so much for inviting me. It was kind of you. I'm going to launch right into it. Every housing case begins with a rule, and the rule is always spelled out in an ordinance. So the city, they see out in the field what they think is a violation, they take the case to court. And here's my point here, landlords and tenants and anybody who comes into housing court. Consider this. The city may be wrong, and that's why the courts exist, so we can have hearings, and even stopping short of that, some cases are resolved because the city may be wrong about it. Now, here's what you do if you think the city's wrong. Just calmly plead not guilty and have a hearing, and I'll make a decision. But guess what? I can be wrong too. And I am wrong from time to time. Why? Because I'm a human being like the code inspectors. And, it's funny because I think we as judges are reluctant to admit that. And people think it's a perfect process, but it's not. And, if you're an attorney, you read appellate court cases. It's all about finding errors that judges make. So judges make mistakes. But what I'll tell you is that you have good options for you. If this judge makes a mistake on your case, you can file a request for a new trial, and it really is easy. There's no appeal bond or anything. If I make a decision you don't like, you can have your trial in front of a different judge. There is typically a court cost, but if you can't afford it, that means you qualify for not paying a court cost for that, and you get to do that for free. So you get your I like to think you get your due process. All right, so that's my lead in, but let's kind of lay it out the best way I know how, so that you can understand the kinds of cases that I handle in the housing court. And I talked about the rules that exist out there, and so I'm going to break down those categories. I'm going to say basically six different categories, and I'm going to describe it this way. I'm going to illustrate it. If I live in a house, a residential premises, and my backyard's wide open, but I decide to build a 400 square foot garage out back, and I build that without getting a permit, that's a building code violation. That's one of the categories of rules that applies to housing court. So if a few months later I decide to operate a welding shop out of that garage, and I do that, then I'm in violation of a zoning ordinance because I live in a residential district. So I'm not in the district for it, not a commercial district. Let's talk about my house that I have there. I've had it for years. It has a permit. It had a permit. I have a certificate of occupancy, but it has a hole in the roof. That's a maintenance issue, and that falls under the category of property maintenance code violations. If I insist on parking cars out in my front yard on the grass rather than a paved surface or an asphalt surface, that's going to fall in the category of a nuisance violation. We have two other categories, illegal dumping and fire cases. So if I take a burn barrel out back and I start burning some of my trash, probably going to get a fire code case. If I take some hazardous waste tires to a secluded street down the road and unload them at night, thinking nobody saw, unaware of those cameras that might be there, I might be in court for illegal dumping. So that covers pretty much all of them. I want to say a little more about nuisance and property maintenance because that's the bulk of the cases. So landlords and tenants, you're going to, if you're in the court, it's going to be one of those two. If you're a landlord, meaning an owner of the property, probably going to be the property maintenance, and sometimes the nuisance cases too. The tenants, most likely nuisance cases, because the expectation is that those folks that live in the properties have the best ability to control the conditions outside. But let me tell you what they are in the simplest way that I can. Nuisance cases, stuff in the yard. It's going to be stuff in the yard. It's not going to be conditions with the building because those are the property maintenance cases. People think of nuisance cases if they're familiar with the common law and the way it used to be about nuisances. You always had to prove an injury. Well, we're like in a regulatory world. Regulations are everywhere. And so there's not going to be that need for the prosecutor to prove an injury to anybody. It's more of just a regulatory rule that requires no particular mental state nor a particular proven injury to someone else. I mean, presumably, and I think this is so, all these rules are passed by the legislative body in the city based on a police power, welfare or safety or health need. So they're there for good purpose. But sometimes you may throw up your hands and say, what's the harm of what I'm doing, even though it violates the rule? Well, maybe none, but the rule doesn't require proof to that effect. And that's the way those nuisance rules are. On the property maintenance rules, these are fantastic rules. I mean, these are rules I think that you want to study if you're unfamiliar with what you need to do to a home to make sure that it doesn't deteriorate over time. And if it does, you take the necessary steps to make sure that those problems are corrected. Most of what you see in the property maintenance code is designed to get your houses to shed water. And so you start at the roof, the soffits, the eaves, the gutters, the walls, the paint, the siding. That's all just designed to shed water. So those are the kind of things that landlords will get cases on because they may be left undone. So they end up in the housing court. The last category under these kinds of cases that we handle in housing court, I'm going to hit it, even though we don't see too many of them. They are landlord-tenant cases, but they are not eviction cases. They are not disputes over a lease agreement. So what they are is either an unlawful under the ordinance, section 50-109, shut off of utilities, lock out of the tenant without judicial process, set out of their items at the curb without judicial process. I've had some cases where a landlord changed a lock. Well, that's a lockout. You've constructively evicted that person and actually put up a barrier to their entry to the property under lease, even though you may have some good gripe as a landlord. There may be a breach of the lease, but you've got to go through your judicial process.
Judge Wilshere?
Yeah.
We have a question here. What
Okay.
types of violations do you see most often?
It is those two, and we're on it. It is property maintenance and nuisance violations, and within those categories, on the property maintenance, frankly, it's boring, but it's peeling paint. It is peeling paint, and that's oftentimes the first thing to go, because you got peeling paint, then you got the potential for rotten boards and those other things. On nuisance cases, it's a mixed bag. You've got examples of trash and parking in the yard and open storage of items that aren't approved for open storage. And those rules in particular require some attention from the court, because we have handouts both in English and Spanish on what those rules are, because you're not going to know them unless you read the ordinances, and who gets up and reads the ordinances. So the trash cases, they're more complicated than you would think. That's the front and back page, but you've got to break trash down into hazardous waste. You've got big bulky items, which you got to set up appointments for, and just your regular weekly household trash. So there's a lot of rules associated with that that I'm not going to get into, but that covers the kind of rules that we have cases stemming from. So the court process in a nutshell, let's just start with the plea, and toward the end of the process in the court, you're going to have a finding made by the court, but it's toward the end of the process, because if I make a finding, there's probably another step unless you've taken care of everything. But let's start with the plea. I need to make sure that everybody in front of me knows what they're accused of. Some of the information that goes out to them in advance is incomplete. And so I'll tell them, hey, this is what the city's gripe is, and this is when they were complaining about it, and this is what they saw. And I wish the charge language had more detail, because sometimes people want more information, but I can only say so much, and that's what's in front of me, and that's what I say. So I tell them that, and oftentimes people succumb to the urge to launch into their defense, and that's okay, because I understand that the sense that they're having, and them wanting me to know what the circumstances are. And so what I always try and let them know is that I'll hear everything relevant they have to say in due time, but that there's an organization or process to it, just so that we stay on track. And so my request of you landlords and tenants, even though you're going to have a lot in your mind, and you're going to have a lot you want to tell me or somebody about your case, right after reading the charge, I'm going to be asking for a plea. And so it's a straightforward answer. It's either a guilty or not guilty. Seems a little ominous for a housing court, but that's the language that's used in the Supreme Court rules, and that's what courts operate off of, is those certain kinds of categories of responses, guilty or not guilty. Because I have to know which direction to take after you've let your plea be known. So here's another thing I'll say. Prosecutors are free to talk to defendants about negotiating pleas, and it's not a plea bargain type situation as much as it is a patient ear and an open mind on the part of the prosecutor to your explanation as to why maybe something didn't get done, or your explanation as to why you don't even own this property, somebody screwed up. It may be that you didn't get a notice, or that a notice was sent, but it was sent to the wrong address. The prosecutor is going to have a response to that too, because they have their information. They might complain that, well, you didn't even register your property, and you're required to under the ordinances. And we didn't know what your most current address was, because you didn't follow that particular ordinance that is particularly designed so that we know where to reach you. So you can have a conversation with the prosecutor, and that's really where you're going to be most free to speak about your case in advance of entering a plea, in advance of a trial. Who knows? You may talk the prosecutor into dismissing your case. But if the prosecutor doesn't dismiss your case as a result of your conversation, and you're pleading not guilty, I'll be having the hearing, and there'll be an order to it. Instead of you go first, you go second. You get to question witnesses. and make your arguments, try and point out ordinances that maybe none of us had taken into consideration. It's possible. I think you're going to find prosecutors familiar with the ordinances. I'm familiar with the ordinances, but I'm always learning. So the finding there is toward the end, but it's not going to be over right at the finding. That's why I said near the end, because then the question is, okay, did you get it done though? Because, you know, the case that we just tried had to do with a date a long time ago, maybe a month ago, or maybe even 6 months ago. I want to know whether or not that project at the house, the gutters that were falling down or the soffits and eaves in disrepair, well, they got fixed. So if the answer is no, it didn't, well, then I'm going to want to give you an opportunity to put yourself in a better position for a favorable outcome to you. And also, in the end, that serves the city's needs, because understand I'm trying to balance things here between the city's interests and the landlord and tenant's interests. And so I'm going to give you warm weather time always. As long as it's a project that requires warm weather. And that certainly paint does. So I'm going to give you warm weather time. I'm going to give you the time I think is reasonably necessary in order to move that case out to see whether or not there can be another inspection to see if you got it done. And then I'll decide what I think is appropriate in terms of an outcome for you.
Judge Wilshere.
Yes.
Just a question. I know the answer to this, but I want to speak to the person who's never been to court before and who's nervous about the process. So you talked about both nuisance and property violations. How much time, per city ordinance do they have once they, to correct each violation? If you have a nuisance, like so trash or open storage or something like that versus peeling paint, how much does the city ordinance time does it allow?
Okay, if you open your mail, because I know it's easy, you got to sift through all the advertisements. If you get a letter from the city advising you of a violation, I know that these letters are sent out to the public address that they believe, hopefully reasonably, is your current address. They contain, I think at the very beginning, please do this within 10 days if it's a nuisance, 30 days if it's a property maintenance violation. So 10 days if it's stuff in the yard, 30 days if it's the siding on the house or something else with the building itself. They leave their phone number at the bottom. I'll bet you if you call that phone number and you ask for 15 days for a nuisance and 45 days on a property maintenance case, you'll get it in a snap, and they'll be tickled pink that you ask them, because that really shows that you're being conscientious in your way of going about it. So 30 days, they don't do an inspection after 30 days. They used to do so many inspections that it might take them 60 days to come out on a property maintenance case. It might take them 25 days to come out for a nuisance violation. So take advantage of your time to go ahead and look at that back page, see the description of what's complained of. If it's not clear, call them and ask them, and get that clear in your mind as to what they expect to be done, and you go for it and get it done. And then you'll never even be in the court. Okay, so now it's a separate question, is how much time do I give? Well, this is after the notice has been sent. This is after the time has expired. It's after a second inspection was made and you've come to court and the case has proceeded through the process. And I finally made a finding of guilty, presumably, or you pled guilty. So when you're asking me, how much time do I give at that point? Probably more than they did. And in fact, almost always more. But, that's just because life reveals itself in the courtroom, and we learn about people's troubles and the difficulties they're having. And it's just understandable in most cases that it's only fair to just give you a little more time. You cannot escape all the negative consequences of the process by getting it done. But you can improve your situation dramatically. And there's just countless cases that end up with no fines, and because people just did such a great job on their properties. And that should be rewarded and encouraged, and we do that here. So this brings us to, and I've probably alluded to it a few times already, this is what I know about life and housing cases. Hardships can be unexpected and prolonged, and they can be deep and wide. And you've got expensive projects like replacing a roof or painting a house, replacing a driveway, removing a tree is $1,000 if it's a big tree, if not more. Sewage systems, all that stuff costs money. It differentiates us from the other courts because there's so much money required to follow the rules. And that's why it really behooves people to get out ahead of it and do preventative stuff so that you don't have the big problems. We have programs, and Mr. Stewart is going to tell you all about a fine program coming up. And he's been managing programs like this forever. And he does an excellent job, and he wishes, like I do, that everybody could qualify. And I think more and more people are able to qualify under the rules. The unfortunate thing for landlords and tenants is that most of the programs do not apply to people who don't own the properties. That would be the tenant. And most of the programs do not pertain to people in the business of owning properties like landlords. Sorry for that, but it does grab a whole other population in great need of those things. Those programs like the Municipal Court Fund and even the Health Department has a program now, and they are concerned about lead-based paint abatement, especially in homes with children. And they'll deal with problems like that. My favorite program is the paint program. I love the paint program because it's so easy to qualify. Apparently you have to only own one home, but you have to live in the home. But if it is your home and you only own one home, you pretty much qualify. And I've taken advantage of this program for other people. And so I know that you can get quality paint, quality primer, quality caulk, brushes, and be set up for a paint job and save yourself, $1,000 or $2,000, because that's the cost of paint, good paint. But don't be afraid it's bad paint, because it's good paint. And I think I'll know it when that changes, but I think the city's interested in putting good products in people's hands, because it's in the city's interest and all of our interests
Okay.
to have houses hold up. Yeah, go ahead.
Judge Wilshere, we're going to break, and we're going to check in with our question moderator, Mr. Robert Loya, to see if we have any questions on the books for you, sir. So
Okay.
Robert, do we have any questions for Judge Wilshere?
Hello, yes. I'm going to go back to the beginning.
Okay.
The first question is, how many times can a person file for a hardship on their case?
Well, you say file, and I take that as like some significant legal type act when I think of it as a judge. I don't take filed applications for hardships, so to speak, but I listen to people talk about their hardships every time. So how many times? There's no limit. I mean, if there was a limit to hardships, I guess there'd be a limit to applications, but hardships are unlimited. That's a big part of this docket. And I may follow up with questions about your hardships. I don't take everything at face value. I can't. And it's just not reasonable to. I may ask for supporting documentation, but I usually just listen to what you have to say. I don't question it. And then I try and move past that and use that as sort of a place to start. Well, where do we go from here? Now? What about now? I mean, what do we do now? because life's going on for all of us. I'm going to skip a couple other portions because I think I'm taking up too much time, but
Judge Wilshere, let me just interject real quick. I think what you just said is very helpful because I know, in assisting with the court fund, a lot of the questions, and a lot of the comments I get after leaving your courtroom. I mean, prior to your courtroom, nobody likes to go to court. I mean, I think we can kind of establish that. But after leaving your courtroom, I think people, when they finally get to me, they're surprised at how smooth the process went. So I think it takes a lot of the once again the gray area out that the city, especially the housing court, that we just want to find people and we just a money-making mechanism. No, we live in the city and we're taxpayers. So ultimately, we want to see the city vibrant. We want to supply people with tools so they can maybe help themselves or they can qualify for assistance. So I don't think that's stated enough that, if you find yourself in court, that can be the beginning of a great process that will actually help you in the long run. So that's a comment I get a lot is that, hey, this guy sitting up there on the bench was a little intimidating initially. And then by the time that you get to him and you kind of do as you've stated today, once you listen and you allow them to have the platform to state their cases, you give them time or whatever the case may be, they usually leave with a much better experience. So I just wanted to make sure that we stated that, and obviously that's part of our reasoning for having you on the show today is that we want to demystify the process.
And Sean, just to add to that point, as a former code enforcement officer, those were a lot of the things that I ran into in the field. A lot of people were scared to come to court because they thought the wizard was going to bring the hammer down on them. And I would just kindly explain to them, go to court, see what Judge Wilshere has to say. It'll be fine. It will get worked out. And to know that you are willing to be transparent about the process makes it all the more easier for a lot of our citizens in the city of Kansas City, because like you said, hardships will come. Sometimes they're short, sometimes they're long, but we have to do what we have to do on both sides of the fence to get the issue resolved.
Thank you. So it won't take me much more time to finish up. I do want to say that there's always another side to it. I'm trying to speak to landlords and tenants and pretty much anybody that would come to court as a defendant. But there's always a prosecutor who's going to have her say. And why is that? Because, she deals with the neighbors of people that have issues with their properties. And, you might deal with the difficult neighbor, and I grant you that it's probably more likely that you're going to end up in housing court if you got someone calling into 311 all the time, versus the person who has the same issues on their property and nobody ever calls on them. So that's a difficulty with the system. It's hard to find a better way to approach it than the one we have. I'm open to any suggestions, but what I do hear from is some neighbors, and the neighbors don't come to court. I mean, they want to get along with their neighbors and be happy in their neighborhood, and they don't want an adversarial encounter or experience, which is perfectly understandable. So they stay away from court, but they speak behind the scenes to the prosecutor, and so the prosecutor, and they speak behind the scenes to the code officers, and so what they'll say is that, sometimes their greatest frustration is that by allowing the conditions that might exist on a neighbor's property, that neighbor that's in housing court as a defendant seems to be saying to them that they do not care about them, that they're acting in an inconsiderate, selfish manner because they're not paying attention to the fact that the neighbor who's complaining might just appreciate them fixing the problem, not continuing to operate the welding business in the driveway. They just didn't buy into that when they decided to get a house in a neighborhood. And since sometimes secondarily, those kind of things affect property values. But it's sort of the mood and the emotion that comes from a person that's just not playing by the rules. So take that for what it's worth, but that's what the city says. My final observation is this. Getting a housing case can feel a bit like an insult. I know that. I wish it weren't so. It can just feel like an insult, and that can be the first reaction to getting a housing case. So all I can ask you to do, I think it's well intended. It's almost always well intended. Everybody in the whole process seems to be well intended, but when it feels like that insult, when you get to court, try and shake that off, so that you can organize your thoughts and think straight. Okay, so that I can hear from you without a distraction with that feeling that you got. Okay.
Yeah.
Robert, do we have any more questions for Judge Wilshere?
Yes, can you hear me? There are 3 more.
Yes.
Okay.
The first one is, how does the court handle chronic offenders?
I've had chronic offenders who own 130 properties in the city, and they have 20 convictions over 20 years. But here's the deal. People call them chronic offenders. Okay? But if they own 125 properties and in the past 20 years they have 20 convictions, maybe that's not as bad as it sounds. So I might say, well, that sounds kind of chronic, but let's think past that. So I guess if you rephrased it and you said, how does court handle people that just persistently get it wrong in large numbers over and over and over? Because I have had landlords who own 10 properties and have 100 prior convictions. So some of them operate that way as a way of business. I don't see that quite as much as I used to. But how do I handle them? I think to myself, what can I do to get your attention? And then whatever I decide that might be done that might get their attention, I try to do. If you gave me a particular circumstance, I could probably go through how I might handle it, but there's penalties that I have, and that's how I get people to do anything. There's fines and there's jail time. Now, one thing about our statutes in the state of Missouri and now our ordinances that conform to them, there is no jail time option on a nuisance case unless the city alleges and proves that something like an old time nuisance, that this presented a danger to the health or welfare of the community. Okay, so they're gonna have to prove something a little extra. The neighbors are gonna come in, talk about their property values, talk about their loss of enjoyment, talk about health concerns, rat shelters and those kind of things that attract them. But yeah, so that's about all I'll say on it.
Okay. Robert, I think we've got time for one last question.
Okay. If your landlord is not keeping the property up and is getting you in trouble with the city, what can you do?
If your landlord is not keeping the property up, and what was the second part of it?
If your landlord is not keeping the property up and it's getting you in trouble with the city, what can you do?
Okay. Sometimes landlords will have 3 refrigerators sitting on the property when the tenant moves in, and the tenant's a little bit reluctant to go throw away the landlord's refrigerators, but the tenant gets cited because it's thought that, well, it's probably the tenant's refrigerators.
Mm-hmm.
That's what can you do? I guess you can make clear to the code inspector, hey, I know it looks like these are my refrigerators, But when I moved in, these are my landlords and they were here. Can I give you his information because I really want you to pursue him? And hopefully the code inspectors have an open ear and do that. But tenants don't get cited for property maintenance violations. At least it's rare. I don't deal with that. That doesn't make a lot of sense. I mean, the tenants aren't the ones with the investment and the ownership interest in the building itself. They just get to use it. So they're usually not expected to be the one who goes out and fix the hole in the roof. So when a tenant complains, hey, look, what can I do about this? I'm getting hassled by the city for something that's my landlord's fault. Then they should first make clear communications, perhaps by email to the code inspectors, about just why it isn't as it appears. It's really the landlord's doing. Now, some of these relationships are so unconventional between landlords and tenants that the landlords are coming over on a regular basis, doing stuff on the property, maybe operating some sort of storage of I don't know, metals and otherwise on the property while the tenant rents the space inside, and it's just unclear from the outside to an inspector what's going on. So what I can't say is that, okay, tenant, let's say you moved into the property and there was 3 bags of trash in the backyard, and the tenant gets charged for not removing the trash on the property. The tenant's complaint that the landlord put it there and that it was there when they moved in probably is not going to prevail, because the ordinances say that the occupants are responsible for the violations as well as the landlords. But this court knows something about landlord-tenant relationships and how they can be. So when you have a persuasive explanation for something you're being blamed for, I'll certainly take it into consideration. I mean, so often, especially when I see people 4 and 5 times, if they're doing good, I want to reward them for showing up 4 times, for listening to me for 20 minutes, or sometimes I'll go on a tangent or something. And so I'm very inclined just not to fine them a thing. Okay.
There's one more.
Oh,
I'm sorry, there's one more, guys.
Mhm.
It says, if you are hearing or speech impaired, are there interpreters available?
Certainly, yeah. Yeah, hearing or speech impaired. Yeah, we use devices to amplify the sound on people's ears with hearing impairments. Speech impairments, I don't know. I mean, that has never been an obstacle to communication for me that I recall, because we just take it slow because people do have speech impediments, and I just wait till they're done. I just ask them if I didn't understand a particular word. So that's not so much of a problem.
Judge Woodrow, I know we said that was the last question, but this is one that comes up a lot, and I just wanted to allow you to speak to it for your very last question. In owner finance situations, so the owner's financing it, somebody's living there with the intention to buy. When they get cited, if they get cited, so let's just say the roof is in disrepair.
Yeah.
Who's ultimately responsible? Is it the owner finance person who's responsible, or would it be the tenant? Who would be responsible for a situation like that?
Well, this goes back to the ordinances that make owners and occupants responsible for all those violations, both nuisance and property maintenance. And I told you, as a practical matter, we know the code enforcement folks know better than to go after occupants that don't own for building code violations. So what you have in this situation, where you have a contract for deed, as you have someone who's occupying the property who does not own the property, but is probably the best person to take responsibility for the property maintenance violation. Okay, so it's one of those situations where the city looks at the records, they say, oh, well, Joe Schmo owns this property. So as usual, we're going to insist that that person who owner financed contract for deed is going to be the one that gets the case. And yes, it is true that under the ordinances that they are held accountable for it. They think it's a bad decision because, well, yeah, I do own it. Usually they start out by saying, I don't own it anymore, but it turns out it's a contract for deed where you continue to own it until you get paid off, and then you give the deed. So, so who is responsible? Both under the ordinances. If you really dig in and you find out what the relationship is between the parties and how long the person has been in as a buyer in a contract for deed, you might find that the most logical person to go after as a code enforcement officer is that person who is not actually the owner but lives there. So the answer is both. I know that people who sell properties on a contract for deed are surprised sometimes that they get hauled into court for violations. And sometimes it turns out being a basis for canceling the contract on the contract for deed, because the tenant who bought was required under the contract to maintain the property. I mean, after all, the tenant might not pay off that $20,000 that he's been paying $500 a month for. And you might go back to it. You don't want to go back to a property that's all deteriorated. So that issue comes up for sure.
But once again, thank you, Judge Wilshere, for giving us some time today and helping us, helping landlords and tenants better navigate the court system. And hopefully this leads to abatement and leads to a more vibrant city. So once again, we thank you for your time, and we're going to move to the second part of our show so we can talk about assistance that is available for both landlords and tenants. So without further ado, are we ready for Roger? Okay, we're going to have Roger Stewart, who will talk about the programs and availability of those programs for both landlords and tenants. Roger?
Thank you, Sean. Yeah, I'm Roger Stewart, and I'm the program manager for the housing section and the minor home repair programs that we have in the city. And today I'm going to talk mostly about the city home repair program. It's a program that involves most of the people within the city of Kansas City. A quick program overview is that the city home repair program is funded by HUD funding. It's open to homeowners in the single family homeowner that occupy their houses that live within the city of Kansas City, Missouri. The homeowner has a pick of one of the offered repairs that the program does. The applicants must own and reside in the property to be repaired, along with utilities all in order and working. The properties must be single family, owner occupied houses. The program does not provide assistance for duplexes or townhomes or other multi-property housing. The applications cannot own more than one residential property. If a homeowner has another property that's just a vacant lot, that's okay, but they can't own more than one house. And the applicant cannot have received assistance from the city within the past 5 years. That's kind of basically what the program is about and what the homeowner needs to think about when they're making their application. The history of the program, it was started in the 1980s, and it's been around a long time. So we've been doing this for quite a while. Now, every year, the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development awards cities throughout the country funding for housing. And the city of Kansas City gets, between $7 and $8 million a year, depending on the year, it fluctuates. And with that money, about $1 billion is set aside for the minor home repair program, for the city minor home repair program. Okay. And in the last 5 years, the city home repair program has assisted 700 homeowners. And these homeowners are all within the city of Kansas City, Missouri. Okay. Now, the program provides services. First is roofing. And last year, we did 80 roofs under the city home repair program, and it is one of the, it is the most requested service that we have. The work includes, we tear off all the old roofing clear down to the decking. We don't ever do a layover, and we don't just patch. We replace the whole roof. We repair once we get all the roofing off, we repair any decking that's been deteriorated. And at that time, we also look at the rafters to make sure that they're okay. And if needed, they are replaced. Once all that's taken care of, then the house is re-roofed with a 30-year shingle. The next is plumbing. Last year, we did 13 plumbing projects. What is involved with our plumbing projects is the replacement of interior water pipes that are galvanized or deteriorated. Also, a water heater may be involved in the repairs. In the sewer lines, we also like to do main sewer lines. If yours is collapsed and is clogged up and is no longer working, we can replace the sewer line. However, this is one of our most costly repairs. You get into digging into the ground and not knowing what's there. And once you've done that, you're kind of committed. So it can be a very costly repair for a homeowner, and it's something that we can take care of for them. Also, we do main water line repairs. Or replacements from the sewer line, from the city main water line to the house. The homeowner is responsible for that line from the main to the house. And so if that generates a leak or gets a leak, it can run your water bill up tremendously very quickly. And also the city will come out, water department will come out and shut your water off if you do have a leak. And that's something that we can help homeowners with. The next repair that is furnaces. The home repair program last year replaced 35 furnace projects, and they are the second most requested service that we have. We do not repair furnaces, we replace them. We replace them with a high efficiency furnace, 92% or better. Also, the repairs may include ductwork that has been deteriorated and rusted out. And I think we have a sample of, that's the old one that was there when we first came. And then we replaced it with this one, much better. The last is the electrical. The older homes in the city, Kansas City, Missouri, the electrical systems were designed for like one light in a room and a refrigerator in the kitchen and one plug-in. Well, electrical demands nowadays exceed that tremendously. So the electrical work that we do is mainly upgrading the electrical service. Most of them were a 60 amp service, and we replace them with a 200 amp service. And this will get the electricity to the home that is necessary to run all the computers and the Game Boys and all the other things that we now need to use. The electrical services that we provide, we don't replace light fixtures, we don't do light switches, we don't do outlets, mainly just the upgrade of the electrical service to the house. And we get that expense out of the way so the homeowners have the opportunity to replace those other things that are needed. And I believe, yeah, this is the new, that's the old system, and that is the new system that was installed. And that's happened. Last year, Congress passed a COVID-19 package to help with stimulating the economy. And in that package, HUD was included in some of the money that was given out, and then they sent it out to the cities. Well, the city of Kansas City, Missouri got some money, and we set aside an additional $500,000 last year to do emergencies and to do furnaces. Well, emergencies are things like water mains that are broken, main sewer lines that are broken, and furnaces that are not working from November to March 15th. And this year we had a lot of furnaces that go out. We had a tremendously cold year and we were pretty busy. It's beginning to slow down a little bit now. We were able to take this $500,000 and do 65 projects for water mains and sewer lines and furnace replacements. So the program is available to anyone that lives within the city of Kansas City, Missouri. Again, they have to own and occupy a single family home. To get an application, right now the program is not receiving applications, but May 1st they will open up, and you can get an application by calling 513-3200 and ask for an application to be mailed to you. You can print off an application on the internet. You go to KCMO.gov, click on Neighborhood and Housing Services Department, Home Repair Services, and Programs, and that'll take you to the application. Again, those will be available May 1st. You can also request an application by email, and that's chr@kcmo.org. Once you get your applications, you can submit it by mail to 4400 Blue Parkway, Kansas City, Missouri, 64130. You can also drop off your application at 4400 Blue Parkway, or you can submit your application by email to chr@kcmo.org. With your application, you'll need to provide all the information that the application asks for. Provide that with your application. It's very important. It really speeds up the process of the application process if that information is all there, and you will get a response a whole lot quicker. So the things that you will need to provide is a deed, which can be obtained. If you don't have a deed at home, you can get it through the county courthouse. You need to provide the current income for all income earners within the house, 2 months of recent pay stubs, award letters, Social Security benefits, and pension benefits, they all are included. You'll also need to provide a current water bill and 2 current months of banking statements. Also, another requirement for the program is income. The program uses the low income of 80% of the HUD guidelines to determine eligibility. A family of 4 has a maximum of $68,800 of income before they go over. And this amount is adjusted for the more occupants in the house or less occupants in the house. And the total income is calculated on all resources and is based on the gross income of the home prior to taxes and expenses. Okay. How the process works is that once you're approved into the program, your project will be given to an inspector. The inspector will get a hold of you, make an appointment to come out and take a look at the service that you're requesting. Once you and the inspector agree on what needs to be done, the inspector will write the specifications and your project will be put out to bid. We have contractors that we hire, and once your project is out to bid and the contract is awarded, the contractor will contact you and make arrangements to come out and do your project. Once project is over, you will have an opportunity to approve or not approve of the work that was done, and the inspector will come out and make a final inspection, make sure that it meets all the requirements that we have for that project, and get you to sign your approval for the program, for the project. This is a free program to the citizen, to the homeowner. You will not be asked to sign a second mortgage, or we do not have any restraints on the property. It's a grant to you and for 5 years, and then you can apply again after 5 years. Okay. Also, I'd like to talk a little bit about our contractors. They will be doing the work, and the city will make sure that they are paid once the program or the project's been approved. There's a lot of our contractors have been with the program for years and years. I've been with the program for about 15 years, and we've had 4 or 5 of our contractors been with us that long. However, we are still always looking for new contractors. So if you know a contractor that is looking for work and would like to work for the city, they can go to the webpage, and they will find this flyer on there to who to contact to become a contractor for the city. We are looking for plumbers, electricians, roofers, furnace professionals, painters, and general contractors right now. And I am ready for any questions. Do you have, if there is any?
Okay, great. Robert, do you have any questions for Mr. Stewart?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. The first question is, how much does it cost for each type of repair?
How much does it cost for each type of repair?
Okay, our roofs are averaging about $7,000 per roof. Our furnaces are about $4,000. The electrical is about $3,500. And the plumbing, it's hard to put an average on that. That can range from $2,000 to above $10,000, depending on the work that's done, especially the sewer mains are very expensive.
All right. Does the city have insurance for plumbing issues?
Repeat again, just a little louder for us, Robert.
One more time, sorry. Does the city have insurance for plumbing issues?
I'm not aware if they do or not. but our department does not have insurance for plumbing. The water department may be somebody that would you be able to contact to see if they have that type of insurance.
Okay. If you have an elderly parent or loved one that needs these services, what can you do?
If you have an elderly parent or loved one that needs these types of services, what can you do?
Well, you can contact us and get an application, and you will need to be filled out for your parents. Once they get the application filled out and all the documentation that we need, we can come out and take a look and see what repairs your parents need.
All right, the next question is, will the homeowner have to acknowledge these repairs to the IRS?
Will the homeowner need to acknowledge these repairs for tax purposes to the IRS?
No, you will not need to declare these repairs to the IRS.
Robert, did we have any additional questions?
There was one that said, how can a homeowner qualify and apply for the program? But he went through all of that. And that is it.
Okay, thank you, Robert. John, did you have any additional questions for Mr. Stewart?
No additional questions, but Robert, the last question I will ask, and I know Judge Wilshere, he mentioned it, very great program that I know I personally utilize. The paint program, can you speak about the paint program and who can qualify for it?
Okay, the paint program is a little different than the minor home repair program. It is to provide homeowners with assistance in paint for the exteriors of their home. The qualifications are a lot like the city home repair, is that it has to be own only one home. You have to live in the home that you own. And the nice thing about it is there's no income requirements are associated with the paint program. So, and the paint program is more of a homeowner hands-on type program too, because the city will provide the paint, but we do not provide the painter. So the homeowner will be responsible for preparing the house for painting. Once they prepare the house for painting and they're accepted into the program, they call our office and we'll have an inspector come out, take a look, make sure the house is indeed ready for paint. Because that's where the paint job is in the preparation. Once the house is prepared, we will give the homeowner a certificate that they will redeem at Porter Paints. The paint that they will get is new paint. They get to pick the color. It's not the bottom of the line paint from Porter Paints. It's about second from the very best. So it's very quality paint that you'll be using for your house. And once you receive the paint from Porter Paints, then you'll be ready to paint your house.
Wonderful, wonderful. The reason why I asked that question, of course, obviously for painting purposes, but which will lead me to something else that we have kind of cooking here in neighborhood and housing services, is that even though we don't provide the painter, we're finding ourselves a lot of times we have elderly folks who, for whatever reason, they make maybe above the income requirements, but they don't quite qualify for a program where we provide contractors. But we also don't want, our elders up on ladders trying to do stuff for them. And some can. We never want to stand in the way of pride, but we're always looking for volunteers as well. So sometimes, we used to have a program called Love Thy Neighbor. And in Love Thy Neighbor, we would let the professionals do the professional work, but we would also have groups of volunteers who would want to come in and do landscaping work, jump up on ladders. It was not uncommon to see Judge Wilshere on the ladder painting somebody's house, and it was very well received. So with that being said, we have a new program that I'll let Lorena speak to, but we're always soliciting volunteers. So if you have a church group or a group of buddies who are looking to do some work, we always have elders who need there. So
Sure, Sean. So we've got a new program called KCMO.gov. So these are just some of the things that KC Kindness will tackle here in the city for our citizens. We want our citizens to know that we are here for them. We are not just a governing body. We are your neighbors. We are your friends. We live in the communities that you live in. We are all in this together. So if you have any ideas or would like to learn more about the program, you can reach that program at KCMO.gov. Send us an email, an inquiry. If you have an idea about something that can be done in the community to kind of lift them up, please send all of that information there. We'd be more than happy to take a look at how we can help.
Yeah.
All right.
Do you have any additional questions, Rob, or is that kind of close us out?
Yes, there's one question. When can you apply for the paint program?
The question was, when can you apply for the paint program?
The paint program applications will be out May 1st, like all the programs that we have. And you will be able to get an application for paint the same way that you can get for the city home repair program.
Great. Well, Mr. Stewart, thank you for all of that valuable information. You gave us a wealth of knowledge today on the minor home repair program. We would like to thank you for coming out and speaking to the people today. We greatly appreciate it. Well, that will conclude this particular session of Landlord Tenant University. Keep in mind that we are always looking for fresh ideas and things that are critical to your heart, issues that you would like to hear about, either as a landlord, tenant, homeowner, or just a citizen of the city of Kansas City. So our next session, we will be tackling fire and safety prevention, and we will be taking a look at KCPD's multi-housing unit program, community policing.
So once again, we thank you all for your time. Please share this. Link this will also be up on the city's website and also the city's YouTube. So make sure you subscribe. This vital information in these sessions. And we just want to make government more transparent for our citizens. So once again, we thank you for joining us. I'm Sean Kirkwood.
I'm Miranda Brooks.